welcome, guys, to our second episode of Ancient Angels. This is gonna be a fun one, really spicy. We might be stepping on people's toes today, because there's a lot of things going on in the Nephilim-esque community that has been leading people in directions that me and JT, I got JT here as well. JT's follow JC.
What's up?
Yep. And so we've got some theories and some things. We want to lay down some groundwork because there's a lot of, like I said, theories that are going out there that are leading people astray, like saying maybe the Bible is what? Metaphor or
allegorical.
Allegorical. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people talking about allegorical meanings of the biblical context. And I think both JT and I, even though we disagree on some components, like we agree that the Bible is what it says it is. Like it is. And it is literally what it's saying has happened. And so, we're going to get into some spicy topics and kind of call some things out and start some online fist punching wars today.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I was telling Brian, I went on a live stream on Instagram the other day, and I basically said one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is because there's a lot of opinions out there and there's a lot of theories floated as facts. And I think the only fact I think that we can rely on is what the Bible says about these issues. Again, we always say that Brian and I agree that Enoch is scripture. It might not be in the canonical books as we have them now, but I still believe that's true. So I have things that I believe to be true, and then I can theorize in that space. Now you have certain people on there on big podcasts saying things that are contradictory to the Bible, or they're trying to just completely whitewash over things the Bible says, and then still try to claim that this is a Christian view, but it's just not. And I think that, to me, we need to have more voices in the place saying this is true, this is false, and I'm not going to, basically God's word is going to be our guide.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a very big name, Tim Alberino, that is seems more like a deception at this point, putting out stuff and saying things that are kind of lead you down the path that the Bible is a fairy tale itself, rather than fairy tales were ripped from the Bible, which is what I kind of tend to believe, is that fairy tales kind of are real to some degree, but they were ripped from biblical context. But one of the big mouthpieces Tim Alberino's talking about, which, by the way, Tim, would love to have you on, actually, if you ever get to see this. Would love to have you on and have a conversation about this. Tim seems to have this viewpoint that the Bible might be a allegory fairy tale kind of thing, and that the aliens are not demons, and rather they are physical entities, supposedly from another universe and some other reality.
Different planets.
And it's some distorted satanic, in my opinion, view that distorts the perspective of like why Jesus is here and like why Jesus came, and like even it actually has an effect on people's faith today if you believe these weird, outlandish, non-based ideas that don't have that pull from biblical roots and like completely go off on hinges, like just like totally ridiculous theories.
Well, I don't want to characterize what he said, but actually I've got a clip of a recent podcast he was on, because I'm not sure he's saying all things in the Bible are fairy tales, but he says certain important parts are allegories. And so obviously we'll just play this clip, and Brian and I will discuss it afterwards.
I want to start with the statement you made in the book. You said mankind did not invent civilization. He inherited it. And humans were not the first things on this planet.
That's right.
Most people who would call themselves the believers and Christians, their world starts Adam and Eve, but it started way before that. I don't know how long in history it started, but what was going on before, and how do you make that statement?
Well, the prevailing perception among Christians and among, I would say, the general public, when thinking about the biblical worldview, is that human beings, mankind, is the center of the universe, that this is the biblical narrative, that mankind is the center of the universe. Everything is happening. This is our story, and all the other characters in our story are ancillary. We're the main character, human beings. This is called the anthropocentric perspective of the universe. Turns out that's not the biblical worldview. That's not the correct biblical perspective. That the earth came into being with the universe and mankind with the earth. That is not accurate. And how do we know that that's not accurate from a biblical perspective? Because in Job, we read that when the foundations of the earth were laid, when God was forming or reforming the earth, the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, shouted for joy. And these sons of God are very intelligent beings. These are not, they're not puppets or something like this in the kingdom of heaven. This is a civilization. The sons of God are members of a divine family, and they're shouting for joy when the earth is being created or reformed. And this is happening. This is the pretext to the creation of mankind. This is the preamble. So they're in existence first. That's why I call them in my book our elder siblings, the angelic race. I denominate as our elder siblings, the elder race. And so the idea is that there's an entire history, eons of untold history preceded the creation of mankind. We're coming late in the game. We show up late in the game on the timeline of history. There are other characters. We read, for example, in the Hebrew Old Testament, we read about the cherubim. We read about there was an entity in Eden with Adam and Eve. And that entity is not a talking snake. I am of the persuasion, by the way, that the Garden of Eden is an allegory. I don't read that literally. I think it's an allegory.
Okay.
And it's not a talking snake, and it's not an apple. This is a being, a very intelligent entity with whom Adam and Eve are conversing. And as I said, in this context, we are the younger sibling. We were created to be members of a family, of a divine family. That's why we were made in the image and likeness of God. But we're not the only ones, by the way, who bear the image of God. Our siblings bear the image of God also. And I know I'm getting way ahead of myself here.
No, that's great.
But there's this assumption that only the human species bears the image of God, that we possess some unique qualities that no other creatures in the universe have, that we are rational beings, that we are emotional beings, that we have this ability to think creatively and to create. And we assume, and there's no reason to assume this, but we assume that we're it, that there's God and then there's us in regard to beings that are made in his image. That's not true. The Bible never says that only man was made in the image of God. That's a fallacy. And clearly we have these other entities in the picture, in the story, who pre-exist us and who are more intelligent than we are.
What is it is there anything that makes humans special?
Yes.
Is
the
it
gospel
the bodies?
of Christ.
Okay, got it.
That God sent his only begotten son to die for us. He became us in order to redeem us. He's our kinsman redeemer. The Bible says that he did not help the angels. He came for us. And so the story of the gospel, it's unique to the human species in that the Son of God became a man to redeem mankind. And that makes us very special in this equation.
Got it.
But we are certainly not the brightest and the best.
What do you think, Brian? So obviously I don't disagree with everything he said, but I mean, it's interesting, like his perspective on like the way his interpretations of the book of Job is, and obviously his interpretation, obviously the big thing is like saying the Garden of Eden was an allegory. Like that's kind of pretty far out there.
Yeah, so I see what he's going, and his belief is one in which that leads people to the assumption that communicating with these other beings around us are indeed potentially just kinsmen, just brothers, just friends. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're just demons. And this is just from my perspective of all the people that I have prayed for and dealt with. People try to communicate to these other beings. They ain't your friend. Like, they act like your friend for a little bit, and then they don't become your friend real quick when you start to like not be friends with them, or you start to realize what they are or whatever. And so, I mean, whatever theories this concept that he is sort of peddling suggest kind of elude people down the path of worshiping the Els, the Elohims, the fallen ones, though. So like that's my theory and perspective with this. Like, and secondarily, how does he know that there was anything before the Bible telling us? How would he make that assumption? What term do you have? By what biblical structures or context do you have? There is no other writings. It just talks about the earth. God formed the earth at the end. There's not a whole lot about the spiritual world prior to the earth. There isn't a whole lot of text, guys. The Dead Sea Scrolls lays out that it's a genetic sort of fighting circumstance with the Elohim, with the sons of gods mating with people in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You'll find, and in the Book of Enoch, you'll realize that there is a mixture of these kind of things breeding with us. But every time the gods that he's calling our older brothers, the elders, isn't that funny? They're called the elders. Okay, the Elohim, the elders, Els. Okay, these people were not good. They were all in defiance of the Lord. All of the Els that came to interact with humans were not your friend. They were here to distort and circumvent worship from God to their own. They thought they could be their own God. And that's why God when in the Tower of Babel, he divided the people among the sons of God. Mm-hmm. He literally said, okay, you guys want to be your own Els, you want to be your own gods, I'm going to divide the people. You can have these people, you have these people, and Israel will be my people. We'll play a little game here. Israel's my people. And then that's literally how the game went down. And obviously, we know the story. Israel's people basically took out a lot of the other peoples, but God's people won all the battle of that. God's people won the whole floor plan, and then Jesus came out and redeemed everybody. Game over. Like, it was done.
Mm-hmm. Praise God.
So like that's it. There is no more genetic superiority. There is no more genetic whatever. There's what's left over is the remnant of the Els, which were the incorrect gods, the distorted gods, the fallen angels that were trying to circumvent power from the Lord. And I think that any thoughts that perpetuate the concept that the Elohim could be your friends is going to mislead you down a path of worshiping demons unbeknownst to yourself. That's kind of what my thought is.
Interesting take. You know what? I just want to just address kind of what he's doing here is like he's laying the groundwork for that aliens are real and all kinds of things that are not biblical are true, because what he's done here subtly, and he doesn't actually, I don't believe he even addresses on this podcast. He's introducing something called the gap theory, where like between like Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there's this gap where it's like it talks about the earth being made formless or becoming void.
One pastor came up with that gap theory, by the way. He had no grounds for it. It was his own imaginative perspective. I forget who it was, but he's the one that introduced that theory, and there's nothing biblical. There's no text related to that. There's no reason for it. He came up with it based off of theorizing there had to have been a gap. Side note, continue. Sorry.
Well, why that a lot of the people do believe in the gap theory is because they believe the mainstream science on like the age of the earth and all that kind of stuff. So they're saying, so if the science says the earth's this old, well, if Adam is, like if we go back and we try to date things back to the times of Adam, you're like, well, that's only about 5,000-6,000 years. So we would look real stupid if we say that could be true because we believe the science. So therefore there must be a gap. And then it's interesting. Well, this is completely aside of that. We're talking about like the first millennium AD having all these junk years in them, and that's why like our timeline's incorrect. But it seems like certain people when they make a gap that big, not even 1,000 years or 700 years, they make it, I don't know, 1 billion years, whatever. I don't even know how long they say the gap is. Eons, whatever he said, like just count endless amounts of time beforehand. Well, then what do you got to do? You got to try to fill that time in with something that happened. Well, now the interesting part about what happened is like that. Okay, what if I was to agree that there was a gap between those times? Okay, fine. Who gets to decide what happened then? I mean, like you still have to take this massive leap of faith to trust somebody filling in all this time with battles between angels and strange things that are happening about the
imagination.
The elder race and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of like, okay, fine, interesting idea. Where are you getting all the stories about what happened in the gap from? As Brian said, is there anything that you could show me that comes from like an older Hebrew text, that maybe some kind of apocryphal text that mentions something that maybe even alludes to that? No, so he mentions that the sons of God shouted for joy when God was laying the foundations of the earth. I've quoted that verse often. Mm-hmm. Okay, but it's interesting if you look at the biblical story, even like the days of creation. So it mentions that the sun, the lights or the stars were put in the firmament on day 5. Well, because man was created on day 6. Or no, what did I say? Day 4 it was when the sun, the moon, and the stars were put in the firmament. Okay, so then there's a day in between, and then man's created on day 6. Okay, so maybe that's when God was laying the foundations of the earth, like maybe like a day, like the day before he created man. So, I'm one of those people who believe like the Bible is not written to be confusing. I think if each day was 1,000 years, then it would have said so. But it says like there was day and night, and that's how they recognize a day, just like we do today. So like if you believe in an all-powerful God, could he have created those things in one day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Obviously.
I mean, that's what you would get out of reading it. And if you look into the stories, or you look into like the Gospels, and you look at anything that references the Garden of Eden, Adam, Eve, the tree, the serpent, all things, when the apostles write about these things or the reference, it's not described as allegory. It's described as like real history. And if you say that the Garden of Eden was allegory, like what's to say that everything's not allegory now? And so now you get in the realm of like, wow, this is really tenuous and this is really dangerous to say that kind of thing, because if the Garden of Eden story is not actual history, then why is Adam in the genealogies? He's like literally in the genealogies back to Jesus. If there wasn't a man and a woman who created who sinned to allow sin to enter the world, then why did Jesus have to come to die for us? It's like literally that's what Paul is saying. Like the first man sinned, and through him death came into the world, and then through the second Adam, Jesus, life was restored back to the earth.
I wonder what Tim's thought on when he says allegory, what he actually means, because I would imagine along the lines he's probably assuming that the snake meant some kind of celestial being from another planet interacting and merging with humanity would be my assumption in his perspective of what he deems an allegory. And it would be like the snake was, because there's people that actually believe that the serpent sleeping with actually there's a guy, Billy Carson. You guys know Billy Carson?
Oh
yeah, okay.
Grifter hack.
Yeah, exactly. So Billy Carson takes a lot of biblical and non-biblical stuff and like meshes it all up and like tries to paint this picture of the Anunnaki whatever nonsense. Okay, nonsense, foolish nonsense. And this is the Tim Alberino direction. He's going in the Billy Carson direction, and Billy Carson, I believe, thinks that he's the one that also says that the Garden of Eden is an allegory. He's the one that I've noticed when I first heard him saying it. He was talking about how it was a representation, I believe, of like sexuality in some component. There was one perspective that they believe that the apple was sex somehow, and then there was
that
another
gets brought
one.
Up so much.
And there was another one allegorical perspective that it was like, okay, well, the snake wasn't really a snake. The snake was a fallen angel mating, and she didn't eat from the apple. She had sex with the fallen angel, which was another allegorical sort of spin-off. And I'm kind of curious at which version of allegory Tim Alberino subscribes to. Really, realistically, I'd be curious to hear his perspective.
Well, it's interesting the way he kind of says, and the fruit was not an apple. So it almost, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I do know, because he's one of the first people, and I actually don't hate this theory. He's saying like the serpent looked like a man. He was saying like that he was serpent in nature. Like, like that's, if Jesus is the lamb, I don't think that he looks like a lamb. I think that he's
What's
like,
the whole missing the legs thing part then?
You know what? That's interesting. Well, there's a prophecy about he's destined to basically eat the dust, crawl on his belly. I mean, you could say that it could that have been like an allegory of saying like, you're going to bite the dust, you're going to lose, like another one bites the dust, that kind of song. And I thought, you know what? I don't hate that idea, but I mean, like, obviously, where does that end? Because now it's kind of like the devil's described as a serpent, a dragon. These things, I mean, these things could be descriptions of their nature. Obviously, snakes. Jesus tells the disciples to be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. There's something about that. Obviously, bulls are representative of like divine beings. That's why I think that's why they're shown to have horns.
Yeah, seraphim. The word actually translates as serpent, but it also.
I thought. Seraphim. Like, is that either shiny ones or
the shiny ones? It can also be translated as serpent, but also as angel. And there is the seraphim sarcophagi in Egypt, which are actually these massive sarcophagi underground that are perfectly cut, precisionally cut, and we don't know how they got there. We don't know. We can't even like fathom how they moved them into that place underground without them like moving the roof of the ground off, because it's just like impossible. So it's like, it does allude that seraphim in that regard could be an angel, human-esque body personed, but I mean, the legs thing is pretty weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. But what's also interesting about that too, as I just mentioned, that divine beings are often described as like bulls and divine beings. I believe that's like why that, what was it, on the feet, one of the feasts, they sacrificed 70 bulls, because it had something to do with that. This was the story of when, probably likely leading up to Armageddon, it was like that Jesus was going to slaughter all these, defiant, rebellious sons of God that are talking about the bulls of Bashan and things like that. So at the Serapeum, what the Egyptologists tell us is that those boxes were meant for bulls.
Oh yeah.
So that is, of course, they never found any bulls in them, but I think it is sort of interesting that that's what they allude to. And if you think about like phrases like "holy cow," like it comes from like that idea, and that's what literally they made. What the Israelites made a golden calf, which is obviously just a cow. It's a son of another cow, so it's like a calf.
Yeah.
And so that all goes through. It's the guy what they call the Apis bull. Yeah, all that stuff goes together. But one thing I want to just really quickly just address that he says that we're not the only ones made in the image of God. And he says the Bible never says we're the only ones. Well, he's half right. It never says that we're the only ones, but it never says anybody else is either. You know what he's saying? Like that he's basically saying like that's wrong because the Bible never says there's somebody else that we're the only ones. But the opposite is true as well. It never says the angels are made in the image of God either. So that's a fallacy is what he's saying. And it's kind of funny. Like he does wrap it up nicely at the end when somebody asks, "So are we special?"
Well, maybe.
Yes, of course we're special. And he's like saying like this view that everything goes around us. For one, it's like I believe in biblical cosmology. I believe that the earth is different than the heavens. And I don't think that we're like, this is not about like the spinning ball versus like a flat pizza box that everything rotates around. I'm saying like that this is different than the way it's described. What I'm saying is, yes, the story is about us. I mean, because the Bible's written to us. Obviously Jesus is the center, but Jesus became the Son of Man. So the
Son of Man, which means human, by the way.
Right.
Son of Man.
So it makes sense that if we're made in the image of God, Jesus became a man for us, then yes, we are more important than the angels. The book of Hebrews makes it clear. Like he said, he even quotes from the book of Hebrews saying that God did not send his son to die for the angels, even though the angels sinned too. So from our perspective, and why wouldn't we think that we're more important? And yes, but I do agree that the Bible is the story of Jesus and he's the center of all this. But he did become a man, so so that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, so I want to point out something when it comes to that statement. You were saying that like we are made in His image, right? And so the interesting part, guys, to understand, and this is something understanding about angels, so you guys can get a better perspective of this. Okay, when it says that we were created in His image, like the idea of it, people, it could be like the way we look with a head and two arms and eyes, whatever. I think it might meant something more along the lines of created in His image and His perspective of His emotions, also not just like the way He looks, but rather His ability to love, His ability to feel jealousy, His ability to feel sensations, right? Okay, that is part of being created in His image. And I'm going to show it to you right now in the biblical context, because there is an angel, and I'm going to tell you right now, angels, I don't think they love. Okay, now this is my perspective, and I'm just going to share this perspective with you. I don't think they understand love. Okay, and this is part of the reason why angels are perplexed by how God loves us. Okay, angels are, their perspective is based, I believe, more in understanding and logic. Okay, and it's not necessarily based in the concept of love. And there's a good point to illustrate in this regard, because I don't know if you know the story about Moses, but Moses not circumcising his son. And so the Lord tells Moses to circumcise his son. And his wife's like, I don't want to do that. And so an angel of the Lord comes down to kill Moses. Okay? To kill
weird.
Moses.
That's a weird part of the Bible.
There's a very weird story, but there's something key to understand of this. The angel of the Lord was like, yo, you're not circumcising your son. You're not following the law. You're not doing what the Lord told you. You're dead. I don't care what you are. I don't care if you're Moses chosen by God. You are not obeying him. You're dead. What kind of, now God, I think, obviously sees Moses for his value and his heart and his love and who he is, right? I don't think angels do. The angel just was like, yo, Moses foolishly ain't doing what God said. He's done. I'm killing him. I'm gonna kill Moses because he didn't circumcise. So Moses' wife had to circumcise his son and throws the foreskin on his chest. And Moses is like back to life and healed from the sickness with the foreskin of his son's, circumcision thrown on his chest. Weird story, right?
Very, very bizarre. That's a very odd part of the Bible. Somebody asked me about that one time, and I was like, "That is."
But it illustrates the lack of love and compassion that angels have, because the angel of the Lord was going to kill him. I don't think God wanted him dead, but I think the angel was like, "Oh, I'm not messing around." Same thing with another angel story where the donkey talked to
the Baal. Well, I mean, I'm always curious when it's saying like there's an angel sent by the Lord, and then there's the angel of the Lord, and that the one angel was going to chop Balaam in half.
Yeah, and he's straight up like he was just like saying like, bro, you're dead. You're done. If you would have taken one more step, your donkey started talking and stopped you from coming. But if you'd have come a little bit closer, I was gonna whack you and kill you. So you got to think like the angels don't have the capacity. I don't think they have the compassion capacity of love. In fact, I think the angels look at people and they're like, why are you not doing what the Lord told you? You fool. He already gave you the destruction. Do it. What is wrong with you? Like, so their perspective is a lot more like, do what you've been told. How did you forget? They don't have a memory like we have where we can forget so easily. Their memory is a little bit more advanced than ours, to where they understand and remember things a lot more clear and very, very concise. Okay. And they remember things fully and perfectly. So to us, they don't have that capacity of like understanding weakness and having sympathy for it in that regard. Sorry, what were we going to say?
No, I was going to say, what's interesting is that there's that crappy movie, The Eternals. And of course, I brought it up when we did the movie Ancient Angels. And the way they show the Eternals, like their creator kind of resembles a sort of a robot. And when he's making them, they're like robots. Mm-hmm. And it almost does kind of make sense. It's like that let's be honest, we don't know much about the angels. We don't know hardly anything about them. So it could be like, that they're different, and they might resemble us, especially when they come down and they say like a man shows up. They're
That's just the form they had to take, though.
Well, I mean, they're
imagine a blob with tentacles trying to talk to us.
The Bible and almost all the religions of the world have these stories where spirits become manifest physical entities. And that's what that's what we have happen with angels, because angels are spirit. I mean, because they're called spirit. Even like in the book of Enoch, he calls God the Lord of spirits.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your heavenly host, but
Mm-hmm.
they can manifest physically. Okay, so whatever they look like and whatever they look like when they're in the heavenly realm, or I think are two different things. The main thing is like that the Bible clearly says that we're made in God's image, and I 100% agree with you, Brian, that is more than just the way we look. It's who we are. It's like, yeah. So I think that like especially the Bible's written to us to explain like kind of like how God is. And yeah, you see God shows all the emotions that we have during the Bible, like about like he's jealous, he gets upset, he's happy, he has joy. You know, that's what makes up who we are. We're more than just what we look like. We're more than just this body. And we all know that. So obviously God is clearly more than that. So we're made in his image. And I think he made us in some way like him so we could go do what he would want.
Yeah, and so we could understand him, and so we could relate to him. So
Yes.
that way we could be his friend. God calls Abraham a friend of God.
Mm-hmm.
God wanted friends. That's why he created us, guys. Like literally to know God, to be his friend, to like to be in communion with him. But like, how are you going to be in communion with somebody if you're not created in the same understanding? Dude, you can't even associate with somebody that's 20 IQ points less than you. Like imagine, or higher than you. Like it's difficult to create that communication line, right? So like there is some level of understanding and relation and similarity that you need in order to be a friend of God. Like that's important.
But yeah, but back to like what his main points are, because it's kind of like he's setting up this, and of course we're not going to make this whole thing just about like we're not going to play clips from the whole podcast. That's all him to say that he has a way more fleshly view of all these things, like that he's actually. I think he believes like the angels come from like a different planet or something like that. And of course, I said biblically, the planets are wandering stars. I think that like you look in a telescope, you'll see, pick a planet, they look like stars. And so what makes them different is they move independent of the rest of the stars. They go in different patterns. Some of them, they go retrograde, they go backwards, they do different things. It's sort of interesting that they're all named after pagan gods. I mean, it's not a coincidence that they're named that. Like, I think that there's something about it. And it's interesting. When I said that the angels were created on day 4, it's because it mentions the stars were created on day 4. And so the stars and the angels, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I mean, it sounds like that they're one and the same. So you go back into the book of Revelation, everyone always says that a third of the angels fell. Well, where do we get that idea from? It never says that. No, it doesn't say the angel. It says the stars. A third of
the stars were swiped from the tail of the dragon out of the sky, and everybody wants to say that.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I agree with that. I agree with that notion that those were angels. That's what it means.
Yeah, and it could have happened that the angels, by the end of time, a third of them had fell.
Oh, right. I think that that's the whole thing where people talk about like. People want to take that verse that all these angels fell, and they want to put it in the gap. They want to put it in the gap because it's like, and they want to put the fight in heaven in the beginning, but it's clear when you read it. It's like, this is when this happened. And I think that to me, it makes sense that when you have Armageddon about to happen, you have this happen first. So then these angels go down to earth. All these demons, they kind of get funneled into the valley of Jehoshaphat. And then the Lord and his army comes down and goes to work on them. And then they're done. But yeah, that is not before man was created. Like I said, it actually makes no sense. I mean, it makes sense that there's one story here. And when you're trying to add to it, it's like there's a reason he wants to add to that story. I mean, it's a cool idea. Angels fighting in different galaxies and weird stuff like that. But that's all it is. It's a cool idea. It's a cool story. It's fan fiction. There's no basis in reality to this other than, and I wish somebody would just acknowledge that, hey, maybe this could have happened. Because I would say, But why do you think that? Like, what reason do you have to theorize in that kind of way? Because for one, it does. I think I said we were talking about this on another podcast, and I was saying there's something alluring about angels, that they're very interesting, because it is like you can imagine them being like Thor or something like that, living in heaven and doing awesome things, taking out the bad guys, taking out the bad angels and the demons, and doing things like that. But I think that's exactly why it is dangerous to theorize in that kind of way, because now you're elevating them to a place where God never did that for us.
Yeah,
you know, like we're not supposed to. I think there's an established order by God, but He never said submit to this angel, because we don't.
It says that angels are our ministering brothers. They're not sent to minister to us. That's what they're sent for. To minister to us.
I mean, obviously, they have different duties, but I think in general, like that, when you're making, like, you're kind of having this worldview created by this man or other men with nothing substantial to back it up. And then I said, then it leads into other things where, like I said, it's a fleshly idea, because now you say, oh, well, these things were created. And obviously you think of the gap theory. Okay. So what other things were created then?
Yeah.
Like, who created the gray aliens? Who created the insectoids and the praying mantis looking aliens? Yeah. He had all these kind of theories about all these physical aliens. And he goes as far to say, he says, like, these things are not demons. He said, they're not demons. They're not inhabited by demons. And he's saying they are demonic, in a way that say that they are malevolent. And you're kind of like, but what, so what is satanic and what is not? Because now you're talking about, like,
he believes in physical beings like that, alien physical beings.
Yeah, no, he definitely does. I remember on a podcast,
but he doesn't.
Obviously, we'll mention the podcast he's most often on. He goes on Blurry Creatures.
Oh wait, let's mention Blurry Creatures and what they did to you.
Okay. Well, I think that, like I said, I try to.
We're throwing punches.
I wanted to avoid talking about this because I definitely didn't want to seem like it was just sour grapes. So Brian and I created Ancient Angels. I guess was it last summer, the summer before this last one. And so I was going on a podcast circuit and I was talking about it and I was doing lots of interviews. And so I was thinking, like, oh man, I used to listen to Blurry Creatures when I first started waking up, and they had great guests on, all the people like guys, the Tim Alberinos, the Derek Gilberts. I remember they had gosh, I'm blanking on his name now. It doesn't matter. I mean, all the main authors. And so I reached out to them. A lot of people said you should go on their show, and so I reached out to them. We connected, and I went on their podcast. And so, of course, I was thinking, like, oh, great, this is going to be so good for the movie, because their audience will obviously love this kind of content. Well, we recorded an episode, and I thought it went fine. And like I've done a million podcasts, I thought it went well. I thought I had a good rapport between Luke and Nate and I. And then they said, when's the podcast going to come out? And they said, oh, well, probably around Christmas time. And Christmas came and went. Then another month or two came and went, and then I was like, I reached out to them. I'm like, oh, so you guys gonna ever put that episode out? Well, they never answered back, and then I said, I guess it must have sucked. They never answered back again, and so I never really knew why they didn't release it. And it wasn't until recently somebody messaged me and they said they stopped listening to the show because one of the reasons they basically have a lot of non-Christian people on, and they never push back against anything they say. They never really defend Christianity. It's like they're Christians, but they don't, I mean, I get it. You have a podcast where you have a multitude of people coming on there, and you don't have a debate style, or you're not trying to argue with your guest. Whatever, that's your choice. But they said one of the reasons this person stopped listening is because they had me on, and they did not release the episode because I believed that aliens were demons. And I was kind of like, whoa, because I'd never heard that, because they never said anything to me. I never knew why they didn't have me on. And then I've seen more content where they're really pushing this alien angle. as like these gray aliens are physical beings and they're nothing like the church says. The church is like got this antiquated view of what aliens are. And I was really kind of struck by that, saying, I mean, I really just kind of believe like what most people and, most Christians believe. It's like that the aliens are not what we're told they are. I'm open to the idea that there could be physical things, but I don't know what they are. I don't know how I could. So I probably said something, and I might even quoted L.A. Marzulli, where I said, I think that the great alien phenomenon could be something along the lines of like, there could be these flesh shoots created in labs or whatever, and then they could be inhabited by demons.
All right, let's talk about it.
But no, but so that being said, I was kind of struck by like that. I can't disagree with you about that. I mean, they didn't even tell me they disagreed. I guess that was the weirdest thing, is like that. Why wouldn't you? Like I said, I feel like that these are not things to break fellowship over, and it wasn't like, I don't know. I was a little bit weirded out by that.
Well, I mean, if we have somebody on our channel that disagrees with us, we're airing it anyways, and we can discuss the disagreements. In fact, that's what I want to do on this channel. Actually, I want to talk about things that have people disagreeing points on. But it's fascinating that they just kind of like, hey, you want to come on the show? And then no. They asked me to and was like, hey, you want to be on the show with a and then no response. It was like suddenly they realized, oh, these guys talk about demons, and we're not going to be in that association. They want to take people from the demonic realm and push them towards the aliens. Might be our friends, guys. They could be saved too. Like they could be like Christian aliens. I don't know, but regardless, I think this is what aliens actually are, guys. And let's talk a little bit about aliens specifically on this podcast, because right now I'm going to lay down some perspective of aliens. Oh, maybe we should even play that new movie. Wait. What's that new commercial movie? Elio.
Oh yeah.
Well,
let's not play it. I think you might get copyright if you play that. No, okay. But what's interesting is like, so just to preface this though, just to understand like that the reason that we made Ancient Angels is because there's this show called Ancient Aliens, and it's like, so it's pushing the world into this view that aliens help build the megaliths.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, and the funny part about it is obviously we have the receipts to say, no, it's not aliens. They're talking about gods from heaven. It's the same story from Genesis 6. It's the same one from the book of Enoch. It's the same thing from all these mythologies around the world. So you trying to make it palatable for a sci-fi fan, that's all it is. Like I said, it's in the same way that like you have fan fiction called Birthright, written by Tim Alberino. It should be in the fiction section. There's nothing. There's no reality to this. I mean, I'm not saying everything in his book is untrue, but it really is saying like that. You want that to be true, so therefore you're going to spin things, and you're going to, like I said, ignore certain details the Bible says. You're going to allegorize things that are not allegory, and so when they won't let us basically put that out there on their platform to say, "Hey, no." Those gods were not aliens, guys. It's so obvious that when you have these pantheon of gods, they begot sons who were giants, and the giants are credited with creating these structures. Guys, that makes sense in this worldview. I mean, like the Bible and the Apocrypha do have answers for this stuff. But then this really recent phenomenon of like gray aliens and weird stuff like that, it's like, you're going to put this in the gap theory. You're going to put this thing in the way back machine, but nobody ever wrote about stuff like this. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of like, you got to have more evidence. And like I said, we could, if they ever wanted to, I would be happy to debate stuff like this. And like I said, I don't feel like it's a reason to break fellowship, but I do think it does concern me. And then this is why, for one, it concerns me when people try to say parts of the Bible are allegory that are not. Let Scripture interpret Scripture. That's not, the Garden of Eden is not an allegory. And then you get into the place where one thing that a lot of us in the truth community have talked about is the common alien deception.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about aliens. Let's jump into this.
Yeah, because
this is what I think people want to know, is like the perspective of what aliens are. Because it's like you want to debate. Everybody wants to debate like what they think with aliens, like. Like if you can look at aliens as like a not demonic thing in nature whatsoever, then maybe you could have the Alberino view. Maybe you could have the ancient aliens view. But the reality is, what they actually are is completely a perversion of genetics. Okay. And it's the reason why God flooded the earth. It's the reason why God destroyed everything. I'm just going to break down my view on like what I think aliens are, because this is kind of what I think plays into the, and when you understand this perspective, it ultimately leads into demonic connections. Okay. So from a standpoint as somebody that prays demons off of people, I'm going to share you a spiritual aspect of aliens. Everything that people deal with when I deal with praying for people and casting out demons, it lines up with alien abductions. Okay. All of it. It's like this, bro. Like all of the experiences, people that have demonic experiences, they also have the same symptoms with alien abduction experiences. There will be weird stuff happening around their houses. Things will be moving before they have the alien abduction experience. Okay. With demonic experiences, same thing, same exact thing. When people are, they're in their bed, when they're asleep, they get raised up off their bed. They get, teleported to another area. People know that it's demonic. And some people, for some reason, think that it's aliens. Okay. I literally have a friend that I prayed for. We cast a bunch of demons out of him. He got healed. Pretty awesome. He started having outer body like experiences. He would wake up and something would be pulling him out of his body. Okay. Right. Shortly after being prayed for. And then like he got pulled out of his body, I think, to a ceiling, and then something like knocked him back into his body. He like called out for Jesus and went back into his body. And then like the next day he woke up and there was a gray alien standing next to his bed that he like in the middle of the night, he woke up and saw, but he saw not just the gray alien. He said there was a gray, one single tall gray being in his room. And then all around his bed was black shadow people. This is a very fascinating story, actually. Maybe I'll get him to tell a story on things. I don't remember it exactly perfectly, but he saw all these black shadow things and then the tall gray alien thing. And it freaked him out. He couldn't breathe. His wife like woke him up, I guess, because he was like suffocating in real life, actually, but he was like couldn't breathe in the dream when he saw this. And there was like a whole situation happen. She ends up like the next night seeing this gray being as well. Okay. So like there is an overlap in her dream, mind you. And there was another thing that happened similar that was pretty crazy. So there is like a major overlap with angels or demonic possession, demonic beings and aliens, like straight up major overlap. And so it's pretty obvious when we talk about the spiritual experiences that people have that is connected. Secondarily, when we want to get into what these gray beings actually are, there is a component of them that may be actually physical. And if it is physical, then it is a genetic perversion. Okay. It's a genetic perversion. It was created sometime that they were doing back in the flood. Before the flood, they were doing genetic perversions. We agree that they were just genetically hybridizing, mixing animals and blood. This is why God said, kill every man, woman, and creature, and even the animals. Like, in children, it was like literally because there was a genetic hybridization that was going on with bloodlines back in the day. And you can look through every culture throughout history. You see these animal human mixed hybrid things. Every single culture has it. So all the creatures have the same sort of genetic mixing of things. That was the genetic perversion of what we deem aliens today are. And so it's my belief that the aliens that we are the same beings that we deemed as fairies back in the day. Okay. Fairies would kidnap children. Okay. Fairies and before that, it was the goat man that would kidnap children. That's why we get the word kidnapping. Okay. It's because kids are the children of the goat, the seed of Satan, that would come in and take children and take people. They would kidnap you. Okay. And then it went from like these goat men to like other things, to other creatures, to Coco, to Kakuis, okay, and then went to fairies, okay, and then the fairies evolved later into the latest iteration, which was there was duendes that took people, gnomes, and now it's aliens. It's the same story with the same overlining telltale signs, the same overlining experiences throughout history. It's all the same. Did you want to say something about those fairies?
No, stuff? Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Is that the alien phenomenon is very new. Like, so to say that aliens are real when you have to disregard all of human history where they don't talk about aliens. Like I said, because it's clear that when you go back, going back to what we were saying about ancient angels, that show is I was going to say a different word. That show is ridiculous the way they say that everything is aliens, when it's like you have to say that these people did not know what an alien was, even though they're the ones who were encountering them. So they called them gods. They talked about spirits and different things like that, just like the Bible does, and just like what we can see. What's kind of like the whole idea that guys like Tim Alberino and the Blurry Creatures now will say they're definitely physical beings. That's a fleshly view, right? Okay, you could be right. Okay, then show me. I remember when they showed that, what was it, last year when they came out with that little the thing from Mexico, the tiny little ridiculous looking alien that they supposedly found that was about so like ridiculous. 2 foot tall.
Looked like paper mache.
Okay, so if you want to say this is a physical phenomenon, I gotta have more than just people's stories, because I know that people's memories can be false. I know that people can remember things very vividly and they can be incorrect about them. And that's part of the spiritual phenomenon. That's the whole idea between like MK Ultra and all that stuff. They know how to implant false memories in people. So people could get all marked up physically and be bruised up, and they can be violated every which way. That does not mean that an alien from Mars did it. I'm sorry that like you, just because you remember it that way does not mean it happened that way. Because these people, obviously, a lot of these people are messing with the occult, and then something really weird happens to them. Yep. And then but what this is a scientific way of explaining away from a spiritual phenomenon. Because if you go back, as Brian was saying about alien or fairies and Pan and dwarves and gnomes and these weird little creatures that do nefarious things like kidnap people.
Which, side note, by the way, Ancient Aliens doesn't bring in the stories about fairy tales like that, by the way. That would be very fascinating if they did an episode talking about the historical context of Pan and fairy tales and how it relates to their theory that the aliens aren't, because it is very well connected, but they don't want to talk about that stuff. They don't want to talk about Hercules on the show Ancient Aliens fully, because they like allude to it, but they don't go into the details, because when you go into the details, it all points back to the Bible. That's why.
Well,
they don't want to do that.
So this is what it is, though. It's like so when I say that the stories of aliens are new, they are, but they're not, because they are just the story. They're a different version of the same stories about fairies and Pan and all this other stuff. Alien abductions, as Brian said, it's fairies and Pan doing it, and then but the story's basically the same, right? And so to people who believed in a spiritual worldview, you could believe in fairies, right?
Yeah.
And we'd believe in fairies or spirits. So call them whatever you want to, but they're not like Tinkerbell. They're bad. So they're doing whatever they're doing. And then so now with a very fleshly mindset, you say, oh, well, it had to be an alien. And so where would an alien come from? He would come from outer space. Like I said, I think that when you believed in a geocentric, you believed in a biblical cosmology, you would never in your mind believe that things came from another planet like Earth, because we don't believe in other planets like Earth. Even if you do believe in the spinning ball model, you have to admit there's only one Earth, right? So there's no other place like this where people would have came from, or beings, humanoids would have came from. So I think that all that stuff does come from this appeal to say, oh, well, we're believing science. So it's not crazy to believe that aliens exist, but it is crazy to think that spirits exist that can interact with us. And but it's funny because obviously it's the opposite, because if you believe the science, you believe in like a never-ending universe, and obviously a never-ending amount of possibilities that there could be a place similar to this place where beings like us could inhabit. And could they be more advanced? Yes. And if they were here, they obviously would be more advanced, and that's how they got here. Or this is an enclosed system that God created, and our view tells you that the phenomenon is real, but we can't pin it down because it is a spiritual thing. And I think if it was not a spiritual thing, then I think we could have physical evidence, but we don't.
I would say I agree with Tim that we aren't the only players in the game, but that we are the only players in this game. Do you understand? Like in this reality of Earth, we are the only ones. So outside of the reality of Earth, there are other players, but in this Earthen reality, that we are the main thing to this reality that we exist in today. And the angels, even though they're above us, because it says Jesus lowered himself even lower than the angels to become one of us, right? But that's because the angels are in a different realm above this realm, right? And so we have essentially become even higher than the angels when we leave this realm in this reality. So but in this game, even though we're the lowest in the estradial or the ethereal type of perspective, we are also the highest in this reality. We are the gods of this reality. Technically, it says, are ye not all gods? In that sense, like, we're the gods of this reality that we exist in. And God gave us the authority to experience being the dominators of this reality, having dominion over this reality, to understand him, how he has dominion over all the other realities, including this one, right? And so God gave us, that's how we relate to him. Like, we can have children and we can understand love and compassion and understanding so that we can relate to him. That's how he created us to be. And so that's kind of my perspective, but regardless, when it comes to what aliens actually are, there's two aspects to understand. There is the spiritual commotion or perspective, which is just in the spirit, the aliens appear, then they disappear, they exist, and they do things, and then they leave. Okay. And then there is a physical component to these creatures. There is a physical aspect. And we love to talk about this stuff because this topic is very fascinating. We touch on it in Ancient Angels in the documentary, talking about the physical, genetically mixed hybrid creature things that still exist and potentially exist on the earth right now that are in hiding. And these creatures are a mixture of different creatures. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is my theory on what angels are, or what aliens are, sorry. And it comes from working with Jack Horner and the geneticists who turned dinosaurs into chickens, or trying to make dinosaurs out of chickens. It's the dude that they wrote, Jurassic Park about. Like, I talked with them and named one of the projects Dino Genesis, and was working on the website stuff and doing some other things, working with this guy, and like asked a few questions and got to learn some stuff and had to look into it really deeply and found out what they were doing, and they were doing these processes of transgenesis and genetic turning genes on and off to create genetic manipulation. They were making real life cryptids. Okay. They still are. They're still working on this. Literally trying to make cryptids. And a very fascinating thing happens when you mix genetics of two creatures. Okay. And we got to understand the difference between a chimera and a hybrid. These are two different creatures. Did I talk about this on the last thing? No, I didn't.
No.
There's a chimera and there's a hybrid. Okay, a hybrid is what most people think these aliens are. They're hybrids. Oh, they're hybrids. No, they're not. They're chimeras or hybrids, and you can be a mixture of both, actually. A hybrid is when you take a horse and a donkey and you blend it and you mate it together and it creates a mule. The offset of a mule is it doesn't reproduce. The offspring of the mule can't reproduce. And it's a mix between the two features. It kind of blends them too. So it's a little bit bigger than a donkey, a little bit smaller than a horse. It blends the features. And if you were to take its genetic makeup, it would tell you that it's 50% horse, it's 50% mule, or a mixture of the DNA. Okay. That's a hybrid. A chimera is, you can actually take a red robin and a blue jay and you can blend them in the zygote stage and they will form a creature. And the creature will be born with chimerism. Okay. Which half of its body will be red and half of its body will be blue. So and if you were to take a syringe and pull the genetics out of the bottom half of its body where it's red, okay, and test that, it will tell you it's 100% red robin. And you take it out of the top half where it's blue, it'll test that. It'll say it's 100% blue jay. It won't tell you that these two creatures were joined in one body. Okay. It won't tell you that they're one. You can see chimerism happen in people. There's a famous woman who has chimerism that she's like a model or something. And like half of her body is like down the middle, like two tonal different skins. And that's a form of chimerism. And it's like different genetic makeup on one half of her body. Okay, this is two bodies in one, even though she seems like the same, she's the same person, but there's like different genetic makeup in both parts of her body. So if they took the genetics from one part of her body to test it, it would be different than taking it from another. Now it's interesting because you have to understand the genetics to really comprehend like what aliens are. Okay, because aliens, you know, in the zygote stage, you know, we can create things. Okay, and aliens are a mixture of what these things are, basically. So if you were to take a lizard and a bat, you could actually take them and blend them in a zygote stage, and it will form a creature right now. They're doing this with Jack Horner. He was doing this kind of stuff. You could create a creature. That creature will grow into a thing that will, like a little mini dragon with wings. Okay, you can make this. Okay, lizard bat creature thing, and it will grow and grow and grow up to a certain point. And at its point of conception, it will just die spontaneously. And we don't know why. The zygote will start growing and it will just die. So they talked about this. The first monkey-human hybrid was recently announced. Okay. We've been making a monkey-human hybrids forever. Okay. But it will grow in the zygote stage up to a certain point and then die. Okay. And when it dies, we don't know why, because it will die of either heart failure. It'll die of like some random brain malfunction. It'll die. It'll still look like a little creature though. It will die though. And it just won't, it will stop growing. That point at which it dies is the point at which a soul is needing to be interjected into it to give it life. Okay. That is when the creature dies. Now God sees that that's not a lizard and it's not a bat. So God, the creator of everything, isn't going to put a soul in that creature when you blend it. And so science tells you, oh, we don't know why they die. We can't figure it out. We don't know. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you why. Because it requires a soul to exist. Yes, your dog has a soul. Yes, your dog has a spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it. Your dog has that in order to exist. That's what gives it its life. It's the breath of life. It's the spirit of God putting a spirit into that thing to give it life. Now, when you pervert God's genetics and you create a thing that's not what it's supposed to be, God doesn't put his spirit in it. Won't give it to it. But it's of my belief that at that point of conception, a demon can interject its own spirit into that creature and give it life. It is from my perspective that a demon can enter that creature and make it have life. So when you understand that, you could draw a little pentagram on the ground and conjure a demon and blend it in a zygote. You might be able to give birth to a little dragon. You might be able to do something like that, actually, if you knew how to conjure demons. I'm not going to tell you how that works because it's probably a bad idea, but you could do that. Like probably potentially you could do that. Conjuring demons into the spirits of zygotic animals that do not have existence, that do not have a proper existence that God, the Spirit of the Lord, didn't put into it. And that's what all those creatures you see throughout history were. This is why they were demons. They were demon spirits interjected into animal, human, hybridized creatures, giving the demon an ability to live and exist in this reality because they weren't meant to be here. And so aliens today, it is my belief that aliens today are exactly that. It's an exaggerated form of that. They tried to get them back to the state of being human with having enough genetics in them that they do not absorb a human spirit from God, but rather they become an inanimate birthed being. And I think they've done that by taking a little bit of lizard DNA, a little bit of dolphin DNA, a little bit of animal DNA, and they mixed all that and then human DNA, and then try to get remnant angelic DNA. And they mixed all that together, or Nephilim DNA, and they created this thing that we call an alien. Now, there's different forms of these aliens. There's the ones that also took the little people DNA, and you get the little green men. And then there's some that took the Nephilim DNA, and you get the giant grays, and they mixed them with other creatures. And so these variants of alien-bodied creatures are just different forms of physical, genetically modified, created, hybridized, animal, human, mixed things that demons interject their souls or their spirits into to animate. And if there is those creatures that are still alive, that's basically what they are. And they're in hiding for the most part because they're afraid of the authority that we carry in Jesus, by the way, side note. Because there's a dude that talks about going under like ground and seeing the Nephilim. and he had to sign some paper saying that he would not even say the name Jesus Christ, not even as a curse word. And you're like, you gotta wonder, like, well, why is that? That's because whatever these things are, they obey the authority of Christ. They know the authority and the leader, because there was a promise. It says Jesus came, he will crush your head and you will bruise his heel. So they're terrified of the authority of Jesus Christ. That's why aliens are hiding from us, guys. They're not hiding because they're superior. They're hiding because they're afraid of you saying the name of Jesus and the authority that you carry with your Adamic authority. They're afraid of Christians. They're afraid of real Christians. And that's why one of the most common forms of stopping an alien abduction experience is by calling on the name of Jesus. How is that a thing, right? That's like a thing written in the book on how to stop alien abductions. Okay, if there isn't that, that's because they recognize the authority of Jesus. Okay, and even it's written in the Bible, guys. The 72 after Jesus went out and came back and said, "Lord, Lord, even the Deoman obey us." Jesus said, "Preach this gospel to every creature," saying that there was other things that weren't human at that time. He said, "Preach this gospel to every creature." And when they came back, they said, "Even the Deoman obey us." The demons that have physical bodies is different than the demons that were spiritual bodied. Okay. And so the demons that had physical bodies, they obeyed them. And so what are they talking about? The Christians went out and saw beings that were like Pan, like centaurs, like goatmen and satyrs and fawns and minotaurs. And they said, in the name and authority of Jesus Christ, you will bow your head now. And they did. And they were like, and the animals bowed, because they weren't animal human creatures. They were like some mixed demonic thing animating that body. And so those things, I believe, literally Jesus was interacting with and gave that authority over them. And humanity went out hunting these things afterwards, which is wrong because you're supposed to convert them to Christianity or whatever. But regardless, they went around communicating and preaching the gospel, and also killing some of them. And a lot of them went into hiding, and now they're trying to make their comeback. And so they've been in hiding, and some of their stuff, they're trying to normalize humanity to the understanding that they aren't your bad guys. They could be your friends, guys. They're friendly. Like that new little cartoon Elio. Yeah, it's called Leo, bro. Lio. It's literally L, because it's the fallen angels. They're telling you what the aliens are in a Disney movie that's just coming out. Google Elio Disney. Okay. And it's literally
maybe we can put the clip in there and see if it'll get copyright.
Nah, it's all right. Maybe we don't.
Yeah, there's a new movie called Elio, and it's all about this kid who wants to be abducted by aliens, and he does get abducted. And
the aliens are friendly.
Yeah, of course they are. You know, I got just one take on this, is that you have, my belief would be that based on what we know, what the Bible says and what the Apocrypha says. So we know that God did not want the angels to create offspring, because he didn't make them like that. We know the story of creation and the days of creation and what God created, because it gives us pretty good detail on what was created. Okay, so what are aliens? Are they animals, or are they men? Are they stars? Because outside of that, like when giants were created, it was not something God intended, and God obviously wanted them to be wiped out. So when you introduce something like aliens, like insectoids and gray aliens and all that kind of stuff, what could they be that does not violate basically God's creation, basically God's good creation that he said was good? I think from my perspective, it's like, yeah, like you think that God created a story that obviously is Christ-centric, and the story of humanity being redeemed by his son in the earth. Okay, so did these beings that are not from here, they're going to interfere with the story, and what does God think about that? It doesn't seem kind of contrary to his, like, what God's nature is and what he's done. Like that these intelligent beings that are like us are interacting with us, and then they're violating us, and then God is just sitting back and allowing that. It's like he did not allow it in the days of Noah, so why is he allowing it now? I think, to me, it's the only thing that does kind of make sense is that this is an old thing. This is a it's something that's morphed from the ancient things into the modern things. maybe the stories of them, we really don't know what they look like. Obviously, we don't have good pictures of them. And obviously, if they do, they're blurry creatures, right? And then if you go down in the earth, what could be down in the earth? I've always said, I really have no idea. And I almost don't really want to know what's down there. Like there could be humanoid looking things. But I mean, like, if you think like primates are humanoid looking, but we know that those are animals. Were they fully animals? Are they genetically corrupted?
We should talk about that on the next episode.
We'll have to do a full episode on that.
But
I guess the point being is like that based on what we know right now, we'd say that they're animals. They could have been something else. This could be some funny business too. But point being is like that God created animals. He created man. He created angels. He created the heavenly host. He created plants and fish and all those kind of things. If he created these other things, I don't think that they can interfere with the story unless he allowed them to. But what it's interesting, like the UFO phenomenon or like the UAPs, you ever hear that they say these things break the laws of physics because they're not physical.
Yeah.
You ever consider that? Is like, that's the reason they can do that is because they're not like our jets. They're something different. They can stop on a dime. They can go super fast. They can do things that makes no sense to us. You know what can do that? Light. Things like that. Like it can do stuff that you just don't understand. That makes sense. It makes sense actually. It's kind of strange that you have people like Tucker Carlson and people like that saying something that sounds very biblical, like saying like these things come from the ocean. They're already here. That there's no examples of UFOs spotted as they come down, enter this atmosphere, whatever you want to say, and come down and interact afterwards. They're already here. They're spotted on the radars. Like they're already here. They show up in instances like supposedly with the U.S. Navy and things like that. Now, that biblically makes sense too, because if you have the worldview of the world is surrounded by water, there's water under here. That's where Sheol is in the deep and all that kind of stuff. That's where physical entities could come from. Those mythologies from all over that the deep, the ocean is synonymous with like the marine kingdom and weird things that are just, like almost like the ocean was almost symbolic with like death because it is so big and it's so vast and it's like it has entrances. I think is in the book of, is it Second Ezra's? It mentions that there's entrances to like hell from the ocean floor somewhere. That's biblical. So I mean, obviously, what could come out of the ocean? Things from hell, things from places inside the earth. I guess more, I mean, to put a fine point on this is that it's hubris to act like we know all these things. And I think that's the thing that bothers me the most of like the things he says. For one, we can just outright fallacies. And what Brian was saying was the original prophecy from the Garden of Eden. The very first prophecy in the whole Bible is that Eve's seed is going to crush the head of the serpent. Yep. Like that's what our whole worldview is based on, is that he was going to send his son and this was going to happen. And the serpent being, a representation of this fallen cherub from like Ezekiel 28. I think that whether it was an actual snake or whatever, point being is like, that's not an allegory. Like that's what we base our whole faith on, is like that God promised this and it happened. Right. If it was an allegory, then it's like, how can you can't promise an allegory. Right. So like, that's important. So like that it does put people in a very fearful mindset of like, oh, aliens might come. And obviously you don't have to listen to Jesus, but in most cases, or like all the cases I've ever heard is like, yeah, they do submit to the name of Jesus and people instinctively know that and it works. So all that being said is that I'm never going to get on here and tell you things that I couldn't know for sure and you should just trust me. I'm not going to say that. Like, so I'm going to say that, yeah, like what's inside the earth? I don't know. Probably scary stuff. Like what's inside, what's under the ocean? I don't know. I mean, are gray aliens physical beings? I would say, I don't know. I can't be sure about that. But I mean, if they are, I do believe it relates to things we already believe. There's explanations that could make sense of the things we already know. And outside of that, we're in the realm of speculation. But I mean, like these are not salvation issues. These are important issues when you do have like eventually the news coming out and saying, oh gosh, there's an alien threat, and then you guys should just listen to us. Like the people who listen to certain podcasts are going to say, oh gosh, I hope it's the good aliens coming. What if it's the bad ones? Like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, that does not compute with the biblical worldview.
And I would say, and I'm in the same sense. It's like, we don't know. I don't know the full answer. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you my speculation. And I'm going to tell you, this is my theory. This is my theory of what I think it could be, but I don't know. And I could totally be wrong. like my perspective is totally, it's only what the Lord has shown me. Okay. And I can tell you what God has shown me directly. I can tell you what I've experienced. I can tell you from my experience of dealing with demonic stuff, what I've learned. And I'm going to share that with you guys on this channel. And hopefully that'll give you guys some different perspective, but always be very cautious when somebody tells you this is the way it is and no other way. Like, I would just be like, hey, yeah, it's like, based on what? Like, based on what?
Yeah, you ask for when they say that, then you ask for the receipts.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I'll tell you right now is really interesting about when it comes to demons and filming them, like the blurry perspective of it, right? Like, I'm going to tell you from my perspective of dealing with demons. This is probably the last thing we're going to mention real quick. And then we'll jump into another episode sometime soon next week. But one of the things is that when I film, I try to film demons like in the beginning when I was casting them out. It doesn't work. They know when they're being filmed. I don't know how they know. I had cameras set up in my place when we were praying for people because I was like, dude, this is nuts. Because I had somebody that came like almost came up off the ground and started spinning on circles off of her tippy toes. And it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Okay. I've never seen anything like that. Like, it was like Exorcist. Like, her back was arched backwards and started spinning. Like, bro, it was insane. I try to film this stuff. The demons know. Every time something crazy would happen, my cameras would block out. They would just black out and just film black screen. I had 2 different brands of cameras. So I got a different brand of camera to film it. The same thing would happen whenever a demon would manifest and start talking to the person. I couldn't even record their mouth speaking. I would got them eventually on film, but even when they were on film, like, you'll just see their mouth, but their words you won't get on audio. So I bought 2 audio recorders and tried to record it. And one of the demons one time, before I was about to pull it out and record, like, I had the recording device in my van, and he goes, if you record me, I will curse every one of your objects and your cameras, and they will never work. The demon spoke to a man, knew I was going to record him, and said this. The demon knew. The demon and the man said, if you try to record me, I will curse and cause every one of your devices to malfunction. He said something like that. So the demon knew I was going to record him. Mind you, I've tried to record this several times. Demons know when they're being recorded. They don't like to be recorded unless you directly say, I am going to record you. The demon will stop manifesting in the person if you pull a camera out. It's very common. You pull a camera out, the demon will be like, ugh, and the person will come to and be like, what's going on, guys? And act like nothing ever happened. So I am very weirdly skeptical of footage of people that film demons and have it online and you see them like manifesting. I'm always like, I don't even know what
it does seem
it.
like there's that meme, like I said, in the culture, and also, I mean, not just the culture, but like anything you see, there's always, when this demonic thing's happening, there's always problems with the lights. There's always problems with the electricity.
Oh, yes.
And things like that, where it does seem like that there's something there.
They know when they're being recorded. They somehow know. I don't know how, what it is with cameras, how they absorb light, whatever it is. The spiritual realm, demons and aliens, both know when they're being recorded, and they choose to either stop the recording, destroy the camera, not go in that area, not become visible. And this is a very common occurrence in both things. And this is why it's always very blurry when you deal with these entities. Demons aren't going to let you record them. Like, I deal with so many supernatural things, but like, if you try to record the stuff that I'm dealing with, even secretly, the demons will stop manifesting, or they will know, and they'll call it out. It's crazy. It's very, very, very interesting experience. So that's why these creatures stay blurry. And that's why these creatures, you can't catch them. And so to some degree, like, there's a debate whether they're physically even real to some degree. But just dealing with demons, from what I could tell and know, they have an ability to break cameras or disable things from functioning properly. So anyways, alien topics.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Anyways, guys, yeah, there's obviously a lot there's a lot here, and obviously we can't get into it in each episode. But yeah, like overall, it's like, if Blurry Creatures, Tim Alberino, if they ever wanted to talk about this, we're willing to talk about it. But I do think that, don't trust them, don't trust us either. But I mean, like I said, but I will show you, and I will tell you, and Brian will as well, like why we believe the things we believe. And I'm never going to just tell you to trust me, bro. So obviously, guys, let the Holy Spirit be your guide on that stuff.
Yep. Let every man,
let every word of God be true, as if every man was a liar.
Yeah, there you go. All right, guys, thanks for joining us on this episode. Until next week, where we're going to talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. I think we're going to do a Christmas episode on Ancient Angels very soon.
Okay.
And we're going to break down Nephilim, what Santa Claus actually is, which he's a kukui. I will let you know right now. That's why he's the Coca-Cola mascot.
Okay.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys. Thanks.
God bless.
Bye.
All right, let's